And so I thought, well, let's start out with what mapping is. Mapping creates a curricular document, and it is also a process. I know that sounds real progressive, but it's a way that allows you to present specific information in the framework of time. So you're presenting information in time. It's a way to review what actually happened in the classroom in a set amount of time. And see, I want to stress what actually happened. So there are lots of kinds of curricular documents. There's a curriculum guide. A map is not a curriculum guide. There's scope and sequence. Map is not a scope and sequence. It's just a different approach to documenting curriculum. So I put up here that, you know, a curriculum guide is like a hammer, and a scope and a sequence is like a screwdriver. Well, a map is like a shovel. They're different kinds of tools, and you use different tools very, very legitimately for different purposes and different uses. It's not like you could say, well, look, we have a hammer. I don't need any other tools. This hammer's not going to help you in the garden very much. So it gives you a different perspective on the curriculum. And I want to give you some analogies because what a map is, to help think about a map, think about before and after. When you plan a trip, and I'm thinking of the Emmanuel group that planned their trip and thought they were going to get in at a reasonable time last night and ended up getting in at 1 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock this morning. You know, that was not in their plan, but that's the reality of their trip. I can give you another example. We used to live in Virginia. We would drive home to Oklahoma to visit. Driving home one time, we didn't make reservations for our overnight stop because we weren't worried. There's always motels along the interstate. Got to be evening, and we thought, okay, let's start calling to find a place to stay. And there was a sporting tournament going on, and every place was booked. So in the middle of Indiana, we found this one motel, literally out in the cornfields, that still had a couple of rooms for us. So this is my picture of it at this motel. He had played basketball at UCLA, and so this was his big marker at the end of his motel, at the end of the driveway. There was this giant basketball shoe, and of course our grandkids thought this was great. You know, this was better than a playground. We certainly didn't plan to stay there. So a map allows you to incorporate serendipity, things that happen. My not so pleasant example is the week of 9/11. You know, when that happened, it was a Tuesday. The rest of that school week, if there were anybody that was able to actually cover lessons, I will salute them. But I know that what our maps looked like for that week were a lot of counseling. So not a lot of content covered. So a map is like planning a trip and then the photos you have after it. Okay, it's like your itinerary and your boarding pass before you get on, and then the flight itself. Or even better, it's like the agenda of a meeting and the minutes of the meeting. Because what actually counts are the minutes, because that's what actually was handled in the meeting. You can have everything listed on the agenda and not make your way through half of it, you know? I mean, some meetings are like that. So it's the perspective of what happened in the classroom. And that's what I want you to focus on. So who makes it? Well, the teachers make it. The teachers who are in the classroom teaching are the experts and the people that are really capable of making this. The administrator can't do this. I mean, I know administrators are marvelous, wonderful, talented, you know, just incredible people, but you can't do a map for somebody else's classroom. You can't cover that for them. A district content specialist, just in case you're that big of a school that you actually have that, the chairman, they can't do it. Not even your accreditation committee members as themselves can do it. It has to be the person who actually knows what he or she covered in the classroom. So why would we create maps? Well, there are several very significant uses for maps. One of them is curricular articulation. It's a nice fancy term in case you want to know what, if I ever went to my education classes and paid attention. There's horizontal articulation and there is vertical articulation. Now, I don't have a handout for this, but if anybody wants a copy of this, just send me your email and I'll be happy to send you this PowerPoint about it. If you have several classes, several sections of the same class, like you have 2 first grades or 2 kindergarten classes, you will want to make sure that both teachers are covering the same material for the students. You don't want parents having the slightest suspicion that, oh, well, in this class, they learned their math facts all the way up to multiplication, but in this one, they stopped after subtraction. You don't want that kind of a thing. So it's a way to make sure horizontally, that teachers are covering the same material for students at one level. It's even more useful vertically, and vertically would be the grade previously to the grade and then the following grade. So again, are the teachers covering the same material? Now, that's the problem. If you have the 2nd grade teacher covering exactly the same as the 4th grade teacher at the same depth, I mean, that's a very serious problem of repetition. So you want to find out if they're covering the same material. And Heidi Jacob Hayes always used the example of elementary teachers love to teach about volcanoes and the rainforest. And so the kids will know everything there is to know about volcanoes and the rainforest, but they'll never cover the solar system. So this is a way to kind of discover, are there gaps? Is there too much repetition? And is there missing information? Are the teachers preparing the students for the next level? And again, the only person who's going to be able to tell 4th grade teacher, listen, when I got your students, they weren't ready for decimals. It's going to be the 5th grade teacher. So this is a good opportunity for the teachers in a vertical process to consult and say, okay, you know what? I need to work in more about decimals, prepare them so that when you get them and you go full blast at it, they've had the prep work. And again, this is a chance for them to decide, is there sufficient rigor? So curricular articulation is a very, very good use with maps. I think that maps are good instructional support. If you're a brand new teacher to a school, even if you've taught before, but if you're a brand new teacher to a new school, if you could be handed a document that says, it should take you about 3 days to cover this material, what I wouldn't have given for such a document, instead of me having to invent it. And again, new teachers are trying to survive already. If you can give them just a generous guesswork of, okay, last year it took so-and-so who had taught for 25 years, 3 days. We understand you're a new teacher. You might need 4 or 5, but that's okay. At least the student, the teacher, the new teacher will know, okay, it's all right if if I can cover it in 3 days, that's reasonable. I shouldn't be taking a week on something. So for new teachers, I think it's a lot of very powerful instructional support. I also think that for experienced teachers, we get so into it. Sometimes we're so inwardly focused. This helps us to take that step back and kind of look over. And again, I left out something this year, or I spent too much time on this. I kept repeating this. I wish I had stopped. They had it after the 3rd time. Why did I keep going on it for another week? I could have moved on. So it gives an experienced teacher a chance to review their pacing, to tweak their assignments, and that's really when it gets fun. When I was working on teaching them weather expressions in French or Spanish. By the time I was finished with weather expressions, they would have done geography because they would have done another country or another state. They would have done research into what the weather patterns in that other state or other country was. They would have had to find some population information. I mean, you just really get a chance to rev up your assignments so that they're bringing in and integrating with other things. So I see mapping as a chance to, again, increase your curricular rigor, because it's the map that the teacher uses, what the teacher is doing. Maps can be used as formal documentation. So, I mean, I'm very pleased to see so many people in here, people that kind of look like they're kind of interested in accreditation. Maps serve as accreditation documents. They are accepted by CCLE and by the NLSA. The National Lutheran School Accreditation Association, one of their couple summers back had a session where we all talked about mapping and how, yes, that will serve. Curriculum guide, okay. Scope and sequence, okay. Mapping, okay. So it will serve to document your curriculum. If you wanted to show prospective families, you could maybe work it into marketing. You probably are sharing your curriculum in some format with parents. You might want to share your maps. And it answers the question, which parents would want to know, what is the content of the school academic program? A map will answer what is the content. Okay, so what do you need to create a curriculum map? You can get by with an Excel spreadsheet or even just a Word document that has a table. It can be that simple. When this first came out, there were several software programs that came out that you could spend a lot of money. Not necessary. Just go with Excel or just with a table. You begin very simply. And over time, after you use it, your teachers get used to it, you get used to it, you see, hey, we could tweak it to fit and do this, and you'll create your own map that way. The only necessary columns that you have to have is you need to have some kind of a measurement of time. So whether you do it as 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 9 days, or whether you want to say week 1, week 2, week 3, or whether you want to use the actual dates for every single year, that's up to you. You guys, it's your map, you pick your measurement of time. And then the curricular focus. Now, whether you want to list it as curricular focus or content or truth statements, I'm going to show you a couple of samples from here at Veith, who is in the process of it. Anybody here from Veith? You like it? Yes. Oh, of course, I'm putting you on the spot. You have to like it. But they went with truth statements. Truth statements. Not the behavioral objectives that we hear so much about. The student will be able to perform at this level on this basis. No, it's what will the student, the content that's going to be covered. Now, after you've done maps, after a year or so, and I'll talk about that process later, then you can add other things. My school in Milwaukee, when we started out doing maps, by year 3, we had added in cognitive skills. The teachers had to be able to list which of the Bloom's taxonomy were they primarily focusing on. For classical schools, that would mean, the trivium, which parts of the trivium are you particularly focusing on. We wanted to make a big push about reading across the curriculum. You might remember when that was the bandwagon. And so every content area, whether not just English, but even math and science and history, had to put in what their reading assignments were, because we were wanting the teachers to realize their needed to have the students to be reading. And it lets you also maybe put in the interconnections with the other content areas, whether it's through the assignments or the reading or whatever. So there are options to expanding the map. Okay, now I'm going to try to get to your email. This is the model sample map that Veith used. Grade level, subject, resources, and of course that would be where you can list whatever text series or other supplementary you use. Pastor Keyser he did everything. He did the quarter, he did the weeks, then he put the number of instructional days, or the teacher did, and then they actually went with the dates, the specific dates, and then the truth statement, which is to be a complete sentence, content-driven, stating what is to be known. So that's the sample template that Veith is using. This is the language arts, and it's kindergarten, but they're still learning language arts. So now they've got it filled in. The very first week, for 3 days, they're going to be focusing on the alphabet has a specific order. Letters have certain shapes and sounds. That's pretty impressive for kindergarten. And then it's going to be starting to learn about words are made up of individual speech sounds. So if a brand new teacher has to come into Veith to teach kindergarten next year, she has a map of what she's going to be focusing on, and she has the number of days that the plan should take. Okay, kindergarten religion. I mean, because everything can be mapped. Everything can be mapped. So again, quarter, week, 3 days. I think their first week must have been 3 days long. God used an angel to communicate a special message to Mary. That's the lesson they're focusing on for 3 days. Isn't that marvelous? I mean, see how straightforward this is. I really appreciate that it's not the behavioral thing. So I showed you the sample map template. I showed you a couple of examples. So, okay, let's talk about where do you start if you're going to make this as a project for your faculty. The resources are the lesson plans and times. I certainly hope that your teachers are planning their lessons. So if you're a teacher, please plan your lesson. And if you're an administrator, I hope you're requiring that you see those lesson plans, that you collect them. Before you get started, you may have to you talk to them and announce this project, but the teachers and the administrator, you need to decide what's the unit of time that you're going to use. And again, it can be week 1, or it can be days, or it can be the dates. Decide on the unit of time and how you're going to express content, what you're going to call it. Pastor Keyser calls them truth statements. Other people call them content statements. Whatever you're going to call it, you've got to have those 2 columns set up. And then after, and again I stress, after the teacher teaches for a week or maybe even 2 weeks, then the teacher takes her lesson plans and goes back and fills in the time column and the content column. So it's not a fast-moving process. You repeat that throughout the year. You don't fill in what you are going to teach, because you don't always get there. That is the point. You fill in what you did teach. When I would make my lesson plans, I would have mine solidly booked. My lesson plan book was just filled. But I never got to Friday in my lesson plan. My Friday stuff was always the Monday and Tuesday of the next week, just because I never got there. And if I know that about myself, I just have a hard time believing other teachers are able to just do it better than that. So the important thing is that the content has to reflect what you actually covered in that time. That is the most important thing. So you've done this all year, and you might one option for doing it is at the end of every month. If you have a faculty meeting, okay, everybody bring your lesson plans, and we're going to take 30 minutes. You're going to fill in your mapping at the end of every month. Or if you did it at the end of every quarter, that's starting to get a little long. If you do it if you wait much longer, they're going to kind of start losing the memory again of some of the things that they thought, oh yeah, I want to really be sure I mentioned that we focused on this, because of the serendipity issue. That maybe things happen, they taught things that they didn't actually have in their lesson plans, and if they don't write it down, they'll forget it. So when you have your first map, you're not done. Now you actually get to start using it. So you go back, and again, if you have the teacher herself needs to go back and look and see, what did I overcover? What did I overcover? What did I undercover? What did I leave out? What did the students really need more time with? What connections to other areas did I make? I had taught French and had covered a cultural point, I hate to tell you for how many years, about countries in Africa that, because so much of Africa was colonized by the French, that 22 countries in Africa, French is their national language. And I threw that out there, and I was teaching in an inner city school full of African Americans, and it finally hit me one year, this is my way to connect with them. So I created a whole new unit on Africa, because all those countries, French was their national language. And it took me several years before I made that connection. But when that connection came to me, it was important to get that down in my map and to continue it on. And you don't walk into your classroom knowing what connections you're going to make, but you don't want to forget the connections that you made. So you don't want to forget what you didn't do, if that's possible. Anyway, and again, if you have students in multiple sections of the same level, did they all get the same material? I would think in math that would be critical, that all of the students and at the high school level, everybody in Algebra 1 better be ending up with having covered the same amount of material, because otherwise you've got a disaster when it comes to Algebra 2. So that's a horizontal articulation review. For vertical, once you've done this, then yes, once the teacher has had the chance to think through it, then have her meet with the teacher before her, the level before her, and the level teacher after her, to say, okay, so how were the second graders when they became third graders? Were they ready to read? Well, maybe yes, maybe no. How about when they went to the fourth grade? What does the third grade teacher, what do I need to do more? Do they need more practice with nonfiction? Because that's an area that they struggle with. So was it sufficient for the next grade level? Again, gaps and repetitions. That's what a map is good for. Gaps and repetitions. That's at the end of year 1. Years 2, 3, and 4, it's the same thing. You keep going through. Of course, you've got your map, but you refine it. Okay, the first time at the end, for 1 year, you took 4 days to teach the 26 letters of the alphabet. And in the second year, maybe it took 5. You just kind of make a little note about that. But the third year, maybe it took 3. Students are all different. You got to teach your students. So you just keep updating it and refining it. And you continue the conversation between the faculty on coverage, because what's important is the student learning. So you may end up intentionally deciding to drop a couple of units in order to make sure that the students really, really, really grasp the units that you've decided are important. Again, you may want to add in other columns like assignments, trivium levels, and integration. Don't worry about that the first year through. Maybe not even the second year, but eventually you'll get there when your teachers are happy about doing maps. So here's my Latin connection for this, my caveats. Prepare your faculty and your staff before asking them to start this. Talk to them about it. Spend some time getting them to be comfortable with it. I put up here, be gentle. It's different. They may not have had a class on this in their teacher education courses. This is the first time we've offered a mapping session at CCLE. So it may be a new process for them. But you know what? That means it's a new learning opportunity for them. It's a new way for them to look at what they're doing, about how they're teaching and what they're teaching. This is also not a quick or immediate project. I don't want you to think it's time-consuming, but it does consume time. I mean, it takes place over time. If you're creating a year-long map, it starts out with a year to do it. So it is lengthy in time, but once your teachers get the hang of it, you know, and know, oh yeah, my lesson plan, zip, 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 yeah, the days, you know, they will really be able to create that in a sufficient manner. I don't feel that it's unreasonable to ask teachers to think about what they're teaching, and I don't think that it would be insulted by that either. Everyone who's teaching is involved in mapping. Everyone who's teaching. You can't have one person in the English department decide to do it for all the classes. You can't have one math person decide to do it for all the math courses. Everybody who's in the classroom needs to be involved in that. And it's also cure yourself of the idea that it will ever be done or finished, because it's an ongoing project, it's an ongoing activity. The more you review your maps, the more cycles you have, the more accurate they'll be, the more useful the maps will be. And again, we have teacher turnover in our schools. The benefit of this, to be able to hand something like this to a new teacher, to me, is the primary value, I would think. So here are some resources. Heidi Hayes Jacobs was the first big person that pushed mapping. She came out in the 90s, and that's when the big bandwagon was starting with it. And she's got quite a few resources out there. Then other people have jumped into it also. Again, if you would like to get a copy of this PowerPoint, which I'd be happy to email it to you and all, and I see that I'm actually done. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Kind of a little bit in the weeds here, but this is where it gets confusing for us. So we have a curriculum map, which we have just made, you know, so let's say we've done what you did. We've taken a year and we've put down everything that we've done, and it's a reflection of what we did last year. So now, when we use that, then to look at what we did and whatever things we want to tweak, now it becomes not a map, but a plan for the next year, right? What are...
It's not a... okay, I see how you can get that from my saying a new person, a new teacher could be using it as a I think more of a guide. So if you think...
Well, even for me, let's say I want to tweak it, then that becomes what I did last year to improve it. Now, doesn't that become then sort of my plan for the next year, which I then have to verify by documenting that I did it on the next year's map? But so it's sort of playing a little bit. It just depends where in time it is.
Okay.
Am I understanding that right?
I sort of think I am following you. I guess I would view that as you know how there are different sheets on an Excel?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd have, 2017, here's all of 2017. I'd have a new sheet, 2018. And then I'd go back and I think, okay, you know what, I spent, give me an example, what do you want to add? What did you do differently? Okay. Well, I think 5 days is too long to teach
Good.
numbers.
Something like that, yeah.
All right, so this year I want to get it done in 4 days. Until I've done it, I can't put it in my 2018 map. So you're right, you are using it as a guide, because that is what we do with maps, but you're creating the minutes of the photos and everything by after you've done it. Were you successful in dropping down to 4 days?
Yeah.
And maybe you were, but maybe 2 students didn't get it in 4 days. And so you kind of write yourself a note, well, maybe it needs to be 4.5 days, or maybe the 5 days are worth it. That's just something you internally would have to decide. You're right in that sense, though. I can see how you're thinking about using it as a guide.
A guide for your lesson plans.
Yeah, you're still going to be doing your lesson plans. And like I say, I had never thought about how all those African countries spoke French. And I had done that little paragraph of my little cultural point probably 8 years.
Yeah.
And then boom, it just hit me. What a kind of fool am I? And then I had this, I had to change my map quite a bit. But it didn't change my 2017 map.
No.
But
Right.
in my 2018 map, I was able to reflect it. So most curriculum guides that I have seen are missing the element of time. So they'll have down the content of what the student's going to learn. I've seen them have down the attitudes and skills and all that kind of stuff. I've seen the resource. I've never seen the timing or pacing of the students' learning. So to me, that's what's new about a map. It's actually connected to time. It's much more.
It seems like it would also be good to have like a notes, like you brought up 9/11.
Yeah.
So this may have taken 3 days, but with 9/11 it took 8 days or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So
Or some other natural
where this would have taken 3 days, but I had these 3 problem children that took 3 days longer, maybe without them. Just like a notes column would be
Sure.
helpful.
Yeah,
Right.
and because every class is going to be different.
Yeah.
The content isn't going to change.
Exactly.
The students certainly
Right.
are. And that kind of information is professional insight that you could easily have a column for that. Easily so. Yes?
And I can see in our grammar here, because we are on a cycle often, because we're dealing with, ancients and the Middle Ages, that after 3 years, it's brand new again, right?
Yeah.
And if we have this, we can refer back to what we did 3 years ago, which we, every year it's much easier, but it's not as easy in class.
It isn't, especially if you have combined classes where you've got 2 or more levels all covering the same thing at the same time. And I think that the mapping is useful, as you say, for looking back there as well. But also the ability to make the connections there, to me, would be very useful. I was trying to think, I had a thought. Well, it's gone. Well, yes?
A few of our schools have already started implementing curriculum mapping, and they've already been a number of years into it. Could you is there any insight as to what the difficulties that they have been facing and how they've overcome those instances when coming to adopt curriculum mapping?
Faculty.
Okay.
That's what I meant by be gentle with your faculty. This isn't a new thing for many, especially, I'll be honest, experienced teachers. What do you mean I have to write down what I teach? I know what I teach.
Yeah.
But yes, please share your wisdom with us about what you teach. But I mean, in a very respectful way. In the first school that I did this with, they were highly resistant. They felt this was just another one of the bandwagons to jump on, and the faculty were not pleased or happy to participate in it, and they did pretty poor jobs on their maps. Again, if you have a teacher who doesn't bother to do lesson plans, that teacher is going to be hard put to write down what did she cover. She doesn't remember, So things like that. But those are issues. Those are larger issues than just a mapping issue. May I ask, how did Pastor Keyser bring it up and introduce the Veith faculty to it? Were you here even?
Yes, he might have had a discussion prior to my coming, but the major discussion happened during one of our meetings at the very beginning of the year. So like our August meetings, he discussed the idea of it and that we were going to use it, and he was very gentle, like you said, about it, because we have some veteran teachers who have never done such a thing, and so he said just slowly add to it, and I think we all felt very comfortable doing it, and it was a very simple process that I thought as a new teacher was helpful for me as well. So
you might need to have a teacher that kind of gets it help the teacher who doesn't get it, because peer-to-peer is a lot better than administrator to faculty. And she was at a point too.
Oh, I have a question. If it's COVID connected, go ahead.
I just want to know how often, did he schedule your time to do it?
to make my map.
Right.
No, I did it on my own, just on my own time. So I stayed after school.
So there wasn't release time given for it?
If we had days out of school, and we were in teaching meetings for those days, then he allowed us those times to do it. So
during the teaching meeting?
Yes, but afterwards because we were in school. But I found it was very easy to just make my truth statements while I was going through and doing my lesson plans, and so they were there. If I need to tweak them, I can tweak them, and I just copy and paste them over to the mapping. So it is very simple to do just right afterwards.
Okay. Yes.
Do you have any tips on mapping multiple levels in a classroom?
Well, that's going to depend on how you've organized teaching. So where you have different instruction entirely, like math might be a situation, you'd literally be making two different maps. But if you have the same, like for maybe language arts, that they're reading the same together, you could just have that as a combined class. Yeah, it's tricky.
Your truth statement would be different for the different levels, probably, right?
Yes, I would think so. Yeah, I hope it's only 2 classes and not 3 or 4. So,
we all hope that.
Yeah, and it's got to reflect what you did. So if you did, in your cycle of ancient and what was it?
Middle Ages and modern.
Yeah. So no matter what grade they are, they're getting the same, right? So maybe is your situation similar to that?
No, it's high school Latin.
Okay. Well, maybe that should be done not by the grade level, but by just the class, like Latin 1. Like when I did Spanish or French, Spanish 1 made the content was the same whether they were freshmen, juniors, seniors. That didn't make any difference.
Okay.
So for high school, you can do it that way. So, and especially in math classes, I would think you'd have a wide range of ages in that. So actually, it's not as bad. So that's not at all that same kind of situation. Okay. Any other questions? Well, again, if you'd like a copy of this, I will be happy to email it to you. I always enjoyed doing the mapping, and it would always take me to the end of the year. I'd be so exhausted from teaching. It would take me till about July, and then I'd just start, ideas would just start clicking, and what if I should try this? And to be able to look back and see, where could I fit that in was helpful. Was fun for me. So I hope that you have enthusiastic teachers that can't wait to start mapping. Thank you.
Thank you.